Hello, everyone. This is Debra Richardson, and today I am putting the AP in Happy, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. This podcast will give a voice to accounts payable team members by talking about the growing reality of cyber attacks in their world and which vendor setup and vendor management techniques they can apply to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Need training? Visit the Vendor Process Training Center to enroll in your choice of weekly live and on demand training sessions. Plus, get access to vendor setup form templates and reference tools that will help you and your team avoid fraud, fines, and bad vendor data. So, sign up for a free account to get access to free training sessions, vendor process FAQs, and a resource library with information you need to manage your vendor master file. Visit training.debrarrichardson.com today. The link will be in the show notes. It's time to start vendor data tasks that will make tax reporting season easier if you do them now. What are they? And stay to the end for a bonus task that hopefully will help to decrease vendor inquiries after you send out your recipient statements. Keep listening. Welcome to episode 363, 4 tasks to do now to get your vendor data ready for tax reporting season. Now, depending on when you're listening to this, I am publishing it the first week in November. But if you are listening to this prior to tax reporting season 2026 for tax year 2025, or actually really any season, which is or starts typically in January. But it could really, all these things can really be done at any time throughout the year to make the next tax reporting season easier. If you've listened to any of my podcasts in the past, maybe you've taken my free session, 8 Steps to Clean Your Vendor Master File. I always say you need to clean your vendor master file on a monthly basis. If you can't do it monthly, then you need to do it quarterly. Can't do it quarterly, then twice a year, but at the very least, at least annually. And that's all your vendors, not just the ones for tax reporting or that are reportable that you know of, because you never know when you might need to report a vendor. And you always want to make sure that you're dealing with real vendors, and that means validating their information. So again, this can be done at any time. I will put a link to the free training that I have for 8 Steps to Clean Your Vendor Master File, of which all of these are in there because they're all part of cleaning your vendor master file. It's just that you really need to do it before tax reporting, so you're not reporting to the IRS any legal name, tax ID mismatches, and that if you are sending your tax or your payee statements, recipient statements, the vendor, forms, if you're sending those out via mail, you don't want them coming back. And if you are delivering some or all via electronic delivery, then guess what? You need to have an email address. So these are things that'll help that whole process. So let's get started with the first one. And I kind of put this in order, at least for the 10 matches, based on the best time to do it, so that by the time you do your 10 match, you'll have them all. But anyway, the first one is to find your missing tax IDs. And you may have missing tax IDs. Maybe you inherited a vendor database that initially they weren't collecting tax IDs or at all, or maybe you have one-time vendors that, just would not give you a tax ID. And now you've got to report those payments. So what do? You need to find those missing tax IDs. Now, I will say for each of these, I will have a podcast episode that goes into detail about how to do just that. And for this one, I have episode 262, three free ways to obtain your vendor's missing tax ID in time for 1099s. And I should have said 1042s as well, but go ahead and take a listen to that episode if you need to find missing tax IDs. And I bet most folks listening do. And if you don't think you do, you might want to just pull some reports or a report from your vendor master file and check it out. All right. The second task is to do the IRS 10 match. So you want to make sure before you file with the IRS, or just to make sure that your vendors are real, that the legal name and tax ID match IRS records. Again, it makes sure that for reportable vendors, you won't have any fines or penalties assessed. And then for non-reportable vendors, you'll make sure that they are a valid entity because they came up on the IRS 10 match as valid. Now, I actually have 3 podcast episodes for this one. The first one is episode 176, 4 ways to do the IRS 10 match. Episode 282, what if the IRS 10 match is unsuccessful? 3 options. And then episode 303, IRS Form W-9 series, IRS 10 matching tips based on vendor classifications. And I actually thought I had a 4th one. Oh, I'm sorry, I did. I already said it. It was with the Finding the Missing Tax IDs, episode 262. All right. So those are the first 2, is finding your missing tax IDs. And then once you do, then doing the IRS 10 match. And I gave you 4 options to do it. And then just keep in mind for the IRS 10 match, at this point, you want to do the bulk upload. And so you can use the IRS bulk upload option. It is free if you have already signed up. If you haven't signed up, there's a whole process for that. I think it's publication 2108 that goes into that will tell you how to do that. But then if you do not have the IRS option under e-services, like to do the individual lookup or the bulk upload, or maybe you just prefer to do it other ways, you can do it with your 1099 software, 1042 software, or you can use tools out there, third-party provider tools out there like 10check.com, excuse me. And if you do use something like 10check.com, you might want to just understand what all of those validations mean, either when you're doing the individual lookup or you're doing the bulk upload. They have a lot of validations that they do, because they're not only doing the 10 match, they're also doing the street address. They're also doing the Social Security Death Master File. And then they have like 42 different watch lists, which in my experience, clients that have used that tool, they love it, but they don't know what all those things are. And if any of the validations come back as like red, like they found a hit on some of those watch lists, they have no idea what to do about them. And so I do have a training session that I used to have a while back, but Sovos purchased 10check.com back in 2021, and then they didn't do really an update to the user interface to the website until I think it was last year, the year before last. And so I've been lagging on getting that updated. Plus, they were doing some demos too. But I have gotten that. I will get that updated, and that training session is coming up in either November or December. But I will will put a link to it in the show notes if you are interested. All right, so finding missing tax IDs was 1, 10 matches 2. The third one is finding email addresses. So if you are sending or delivering your recipient statements, the vendor's 1099s, 1042s via electronic delivery, you know what you have to have. You have to have an email address. And you don't always have that for your vendors, because even if you had a valid email address, there have been so many layoffs. We hear about that all the time nowadays anyway. In fourth quarter 2025, there are large companies with layoffs, and then people also, right, they transition, and so you may have an email address before a contact that is no longer there. And so what I have is episode 146, 9 ways to collect missing vendor email addresses to update the vendor master file. And so go ahead and take a listen to that one. And then if you are sending your payee statements, right, your vendors 1099s, 1042 forms via mail, and a lot of you are probably doing a mix of the two. But if you're sending it via mail, then guess what? You have to standardize it or format it, that address, so that it is mailable, because you definitely don't want that coming back. You don't want to send out all your 1099, 1042 forms and turn around and have them all come back, or half of them come back because they're not deliverable. And now you got rework to do. Not to mention the fact that you need to log them, right? Keep track of those forms that come back, because if you have a form that comes back, that means it's a delay in the vendor getting the form, which means it's a delay on any corrections that the vendor will tell you when they get the form. And a delay in corrections can mean a penalty or a higher penalty. So you want to get the forms to the vendors as soon as possible. And so I have 3 episodes for this one. The first one is episode 35, 4 options to scrub addresses in your vendor master file. The second one is episode 124. Do you have vacant or inactive vendor addresses in your vendor master file? And then the third one is episode 270, 4 free official sources to find a vendor address just in time for 1099 distribution. And I should have said 1042 as well on that one too. So those are the 4 tasks that you need to do now to get your vendor data ready for tax reporting season. Find missing tax IDs, do the 10 match, find email addresses, and then standardize or format your vendor's street address. Now, here's a bonus. Now that you know, right, because you've done the IRS 10 match, now that you know the valid tax IDs, the valid legal name, the valid address, or standardized valid address, and an email address, right, a standard email address, then why not check for duplicates? Because there is nothing worse than a vendor getting 2 separate, let's say, for example, 1099 NEC forms, and then calling you and wondering why, because you're going to have to now do, right, some rework to get that duplicate vendor consolidated. And so if you check for duplicate vendors before you send them out, guess what? You saved your team a phone call. And don't you get enough phone calls when you send out those 1099s and 1042s? So definitely do yourself a favor and look for duplicate vendors before you send them out. So that was a bonus. All right, so thanks everyone. I hope you enjoyed the 363rd episode of the Putting the AP in Happy podcast, where accounts payable teams are empowered to protect the vendor master file from fraud. Don't forget to check the show notes for the links mentioned in the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and writing a review of my podcast on the platform that you use to listen. Stay happy.